Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 155 of Sports Management Podcast. If you have ever learned anything from this show, please show your gratitude by subscribing to the podcast in your podcast app. And if you feel extra generous, leave a 5-star review. This will help the show grow, and the bigger the show, the bigger the guests. Thank you. Today's guest is Ben Pilbeam, the Director of Talent Management at thinkBeyond. Ben has previous experiences from sponsorships and is currently leveraging these skills among many more to serve athletes. Ben works with athletes like Michael Johnson, Carl Frampton, Molly Thompson-Smith, and many more. We spoke about what skills you need to work in athlete management, how athletes can become purposeful leaders, what he has learned from high performers, the importance of internships, his background growing up on a farm, and much more. Ben Pilbeam, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure to have you on the show. You are the Director of Talent Management at thinkBeyond. So can you tell us a little bit about the company and your role?
Yeah, sure. No problem at all. So thinkBeyond is a social impact and sustainability consultancy where we work within the world of sort of sport and entertainment. We support brands, leagues, teams, and athletes, which is kind of the area that I sit in. And our approach kind of falls under 4 pillars. One of which is the purposeful leaders piece, which is where I sit, and I can talk about that a little bit in a moment. And then the other 3 are sustainable organizations. So embedding sustainability practices and systems within teams, leagues, venues, and their operational system. Impactful programs is the next one, where we develop and implement strategies and initiatives that have a real community change in them. And then the last thing is the inspiring communications, which essentially is just championing the transformative role that sport can have in shaping a better future, really, within that. So kind of they're the 4 pillars. And so the purposeful leaders piece, which is where I sit, which has evolved a bit in recent times, where we used to be called Think Beyond Talent, which inherently was very much us just working with athletes, current and people, athletes who are transitioning to sort of the next stage of their career and after retiring. And whilst we still very much do that, we believe there's also a real opportunity for executives and young people and rising stars within who aren't necessarily athletes, but have a real appetite to use their platform, albeit small or big, depending on who they are, to have an impact in their kind of community, but then also believe that they can have a commercial success with that. So my role is essentially to lead and guide and mentor and help and support these individuals, both athletes or business executives or people who have this passion, to give them a long and fulfilling career in that particular area, really. So I have a team that helps me deliver that. So, and I suppose just to go a little bit deeper, it tends to fall certainly at the moment within 3 areas of service. So we'll probably talk about some of the athletes that we work with, but the first sort of service is the management bit. So we, on a long term, we are the agent or the management team for a select number of individuals, where we'll do most things and everything from commercial development through to their own brand development to community initiatives, just being their kind of, I suppose, day-to-day contact in terms of managing their career. We then have the one-off strategic piece. So there might be many individuals out there who have an agent or have people that they work with, but aren't quite, they understand that they have an interest or a passion, but they don't know how to kind of go about bringing it to life. So we will work with other agents or just the individual themselves on a one-off piece of work that kind of enables them to then take their, I suppose, career to the next level, and we'll do that as a one-off piece of work. And then the last piece, which is an interesting one, which we've kind of developed certainly in quite recently, is going into teams and leagues and sporting organisations and delivering seminars and workshops and just around the role of the athlete and the kind of the opportunities there in that space. Because we believe, organisations have a duty of care to be looking after their athletes, and some of them don't know how to best utilise that. So we'll come in and work with those organisations. So that is a sort of top line overview of what we do. And yeah, it's great to kind of be involved in this sector, and have been for the last sort of decade or so now working with talent. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a sort of slight overview of what we do.
Definitely, and really interesting. And of course, you have a client roster with many well-known names, so Michael Johnson, Carl Frampton, Molly Thompson-Smith, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So with regards to the three pillars that you spoke about, like how can this look like in a day-to-day? There are some Netflix documentaries, there are books, it's their appearances, and so how are you working with them?
Yeah. I always get asked, like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Because it's always it's very, very difficult to actually, everything every day is very, very different. But ultimately, we'll sit down with an individual at the start of when we start working with them, or if we've been working with them for a number of years, each year we'll work out kind of what the focus is for short and long term in terms of their career and the areas that they want to try and explore or they're interested in. And that can be at the heart of it. As I say, we'll create a bit of a narrative, and that will underpin everything that we do in terms of who we then try and speak to try and develop that career. So, it can be across a speaker. It can be a corporate keynote speaker. So we'll go and try and source and bring to life those opportunities for individuals. There's the commercial partnerships, so the sponsorships and endorsement side of things. As you say, there's the kind of content side. So the documentaries, there's the podcasts, I would probably put books and things within that kind of space now. So that is an avenue for individuals to try and go down. And certainly, obviously, documentaries are very rife at the moment. That's an opportunity for develop that individual brand and people to work out a little, to understand a little bit more about them. And then the podcast piece is quite interesting, isn't it? From a sort of long-term generation, in trying to put them into a place to talk about things that they care about on a regular basis as well. And then you maybe have the more traditional media elements as well. So whether it's a pundit or a analyst on TV, whether you're a host or sit on as a co-commentator or a co-host. So we just understand, and and I suppose there's also this world of the digital opportunities as well. So you mentioned Molly Thompson-Smith there. She's really taken in Instagram and the content that she's started. Well, she has created over the last sort of 5 or 6 years has enabled her to have such a connection with her community that she's able to kind of commercialize that through paid partnerships and things. And the opportunity to create your own brand on social media and YouTube, and give your fans a real opportunity to see an insight on what your day-to-day life is, and follow you. And there are some really great examples of athletes that are doing who are embracing the world of social media to do that. So our day-to-day role is to try and bring all those opportunities to life for individuals, but at the core of it, the sort of social purpose. And I know it's a bit of a buzzword, and it's been sort of thrown around not a lot the last few years, but we work with individuals who generally have a care about their place in society. So that will be all those opportunities that we bring to the fore will be underpinned by that strategy.
Yeah, because I know that that the athletes or ex-athletes should be acting as purposeful leaders in society and around. So what could be an example of that?
So I find the whole purposeful leaders thing, that it works for us as an organizations, and the people that we work with, it aligns really, really well to. And we'll only tend to work with individuals who genuinely really want to kind of have an impact. But the kind of caveat to that is that not everyone, and I feel, we are unfortunate in a world, in society, where the pressure for individuals, certainly sportsmen and women, because of the privileged position that they are in, that we're all now expecting them to be well read on certain issues, or they have to have political views. So not everyone needs to, everyone comes to it at different stages of their lives, and so we're as a company aren't going to be for everyone at any particular point in their career, but we just believe that, number one, it's the right thing to do, but also just the way that the world is evolving, and the pressures that are being put on businesses and organizations when it comes to sustainability or inclusion, or anything around that these organizations are now wanting to align with individuals who share the same passion, who have the same genuine kind of connection and beliefs in them that they do. So the obvious one was around obviously Marcus Rashford during COVID with the free school meals. There's been loads of individuals that have done it on various different scales, and we just believe it's the right thing to do, but also believe that there are genuine opportunities out there for athletes to work in tandem with businesses who share the same values ultimately.
No, that's a good point. That of course they are well-known individuals, but you can't, at the same time, it's not reasonable to assume that someone should be up and read on every single political issue in the world as well.
No, and look, and ultimately they're athletes. Their number one, I suppose, focus is their performance, right? They want to be the best athlete that they can be. But I've always said to all the individuals that I either come in contact with or work with, you can never be 100% on, right? So you can, because it's unhealthy. So you can't be 100% on doing your sport 100% of the time. So if you can carve out, and a lot of individuals have times off and days off, and will actually ultimately have interests elsewhere. If you can bring that to life and showcase your personality outside of your sport, we are in this world that you can really showcase that to the world. And there are individuals who may not be the most well-known stars around the world, but have embraced the content opportunity across social media to develop themselves as a personality, or may have experienced something in their career that the everyday person has probably experienced and has really jumped into that. And so you don't need to be obviously we've gone past this whole just go with the biggest athlete that there is. There's genuine stories out there now with individuals that are going, who have done some cool stuff, but have some really great backstories that we can really connect to as a consumer if they're connected to a brand.
Interesting. So of course we mentioned there are different, talking on the content side, there are different ways to do that. So Carl Frampton has a book, and then you mentioned podcast appearances, and then there's also the Sprint documentary that Michael Johnson will take a big part in. So of course in a book it's more then it's your story. He can be a little bit like more into details, and the same with podcasts, that usually if it's a long-term content you can expand a little bit more, but also then you have the TV appearances, and then you need to pitch whatever you want in shorter time. So how are you mixing that for helping them with that, so that they get be involved in different types in these medias?
Yeah, it's a real fine balance. You want to, I suppose, if you work with an individual who may be retired, it's a bit of an easier kind of job to balance those opportunities, because you haven't got training and that side of thing to kind of I suppose go up against. So when, for example, Carl, he really embraced the opportunities outside of his sport when he was in it, and he did a podcast series for a couple of years where he was doing one episode every week, and he was very much still at the peak of his powers when he was doing his boxing. So he understood that he needed to do something like that, because he knew he was a couple of years off retiring. So he needed to kind of develop his profile in I suppose, a different environment, because so people could see who he was, and that he wasn't just this guy that boxed in a ring. He actually did something else. So it's a real fine balance, and as you say, each project requires a different commitment here and there. For example, Michael in the Sprint series, that was filmed over a couple of days. He's contributed to the voiceover and some, one of these, a regular talking head throughout that series. So you'll get to see that when that gets released in a few weeks' time. So yeah, it's just a balancing act with all the other kind of commitments that these guys got going on. But my job ultimately is to try and provide the opportunities and that align with kind of the long-term strategy. And yeah, then we're not going to be able to deliver them all because of other, we've got other commitments that we need to kind of come first. But we will do what we can to kind of, take those opportunities up where possible.
Of course. Now, well, Michael Johnson is a retired athlete, but you're also working with some athletes that are, during their career. So how much, when there is someone who is an active player, how much are you thinking and planning with them about post-career?
Quite a lot. Like, as I say, I always try to plant the seed reasonably early on in that career, and whether that's just doing something slightly different once every 6 months or having the conversation every other week just to chat about kind of the future and things. Like, each athlete has a different kind of appetite for it because some people are so dedicated to the sport they just don't want to even think about the future. And that's fine in some respects, but I think as long as I would say that the sweet spot certainly is probably a couple of years before, certainly if you want to get into the world of the media world. But you've got now athletes who are setting up their own businesses and brands or investing in large scale organizations and building their own podcast, the production companies and things like that, which whilst they're not like necessarily leading on it, it's something that they will then probably drive when they retire. So it probably also depends on what financial situation you're in as well, because depending on how successful you've been. But I always use Carl as an example because he's someone that it was quite reasonably straightforward and easy process because he understood that he was going to be retiring in a couple of years' time, and he didn't have much else to do. He's invested his money in sort of property and things like that, but he knew he needed to do something on a day-to-day basis, and we kind of started to sort that plan out a few years ahead of he retired, and he bought into it. Some people don't.
Of course, and Carl is a really good case study because if you think about like in boxing that you're taking a lot of damage and it's a really tough sport, and being at the top of boxing and still being so, smart and well-spoken and really thinking about his career and writing the book and all of this really shows what a guy he is.
Yeah, it is. And, boxing is one of those sports that you love, but also hate at the same time. And it's an amazing sport to have kind of been able to work within, but it also quite frightening the amount of people that don't have that decent post career. There's only a handful of boxers that ever make it, are making a decent living out of their sport even before they've got to that retirement stage. So you're right, there is the damage element, but a lot of these individuals have come from backgrounds that so boxing has enabled them to change their lives, but then they're not always don't necessarily have the right team support network around them for when they do retire, that they can kind of utilize the opportunities provided them. And look, Carl was just, Carl, yes, number one, he was a hell of a fighter and was one of the best to have ever done it. But he also had a really good, family around him, and his wife and his parents are really sort of salt of the earth people and kept him real and kept him straight. And I think Carl has always been, the nicest person you'll ever meet, and I think people respect that. He'll call a spade, so he won't kind of sort of bullshit you, essentially. So, which I think people have always respected, and I think that has set him in good stead for when he's then gone into the media and the other elements, the books, the podcasts, and all the various other things.
Interesting. So I'm interested in the nitty gritty of what you do. So I would like to start with, what type of skills would you say you need in order to work in athlete management?
You need to have an element of it depends on what your role is within that athlete management, really, because there are lots of different. But if I'm sort of taking my role, which is heavily commercially driven, so which is around sort of sourcing commercial opportunities for people. You need to have an element of kind of like what's around the corner, or looking over the fence, or constantly having that sort of slight want and drive to try and find that next opportunity, whilst also not kind of neglecting kind of what's immediately around you as well. So it's kind of the fine balance of looking longer term, because it's all about putting, because whilst it's, oh, we're going to go and try and find this opportunity, there is a strategy to it. So it's kind of making sure you are aligned with that strategy. And so the skill was being, I'd say you need to be, kind of need to have a bit of kind of a go-getter about you. I think you need an element of resilience, because you get a lot of rejection in terms of from the opportunities. I think you need to have good communication skills. You need to, I think, just have generally good ethics as well, and be a good person. I think certainly within the commercial space that the industry is really small, and I think I've always sort of prided myself on trying to actually be reasonably a decent bloke to deal with, even in tough situations, and try to kind of remove any sort of arrogance out of kind of discussions or negotiations. I think you never quite know when you're going to come across that individual again. So, there's a variety of different. You need to be quite thick-skinned. I've been in certain scenarios where it hasn't particularly gone well for me or a client or the business. So you need to have an element of resilience about it. But I think it's nothing. None of these skills are particularly unique for this. And I think you need them in a lot of industries, I think. But I think you need an element of kind of like, just an enthusiasm for the job. I think you need to love what you do, because while sport like is the most amazing industry to work in, it has a tendency to knock you down every so often. So I think I get to work with some amazing people who do some great things, and if I can try and help and support and guide them in the direction, then that's sort of enough for me in terms of sort of satisfaction. But so I've kind of gone off on probably a bit of a tangent there in terms of other kind of learnings.
No, I like that. You have previous experiences from sponsorships as well, and worked with that quite a bit. So how would you say that that's helping you now in your current role?
Yeah, so before working into athlete management, I worked for 2 or 3 years at a sports marketing sponsorship agency, which was called Cara Sponsorship at the time. It's now evolved into MKTG, who are a great agency, and I have some great friends who still work there. And I think that enabled me to, so going into an agency setting anyway, like was as almost my first job in the industry. It gave me the opportunity to look at how the world of sports marketing works, rather than going directly into athlete management. So it gave me an opportunity to sort of how the media buying element kind of factors into it. How do you then bring the PR and events and the experiential, and what ultimately is hospitality and ticketing and corporate comms, and how does the sports marketing landscape kind of work. So that gave me a really good base of knowledge, and certainly from a commercial perspective, it gave me a good base as to how the industry works, that enabled me to then go, right, I kind of know what brands are wanting, what they're wanting from athletes, and then I could then take some of that kind of commercial nous that I learned to then go into the athlete world, because we were managing sponsorships on behalf of brands. That's kind of what we were doing, and I worked across swimming and rugby and football. So it enabled me to kind of have a really good understanding of the industry, and that I could then take to the athlete space.
So you mentioned you have been in different sports. Does it differ a lot in your day-to-day job if you're working in one sport versus another?
Yeah, no, I was thinking this earlier on actually. The basic skills I don't think do. Like, I think your communication, your negotiation, and a willingness to try and find where that opportunity is, I don't think that necessarily changes. Ultimately, what you I suppose you build is the knowledge of that sport, and who's in that sport, what brands are involved in that sport, who are the senior decision makers within that sport, both within the brands or the leagues or the teams, and you just, I I suppose if you then got the opportunity to, like, for example, with boxing, I knew a little bit about boxing, but when we started working with Carl, just through, you throws yourself into it. And now I would say I'm pretty confident I would know a lot about it. And it's the same when I worked at the sponsorship agency before working with athletes. I didn't know a huge amount about swimming, but then I worked on British Gas's sponsorship of British swimming for a number of years. So kind of I then was suddenly, incredibly knowledgeable about the swimming world at that particular time. So I think the base level skills don't change. It's just the knowledge of the sport is probably more paramount than anything. Certainly from my kind of experience.
Yeah, no, but that makes sense. And also something that I was thinking about is we have mentioned these great athletes and high performers.
Yeah,
So, what have you learned from working so closely with high performers?
a lot. Like in terms of, in probably more than I can I'm probably aware. I suspect, and whether that's around how you communicate to them, what do they need to know against like what they don't need to know, timings. All these individuals have kind of got to their top of their sport for a particular reason, and they all work in very different ways. So it's just once we've understood their ways of working and how they like to work on their day-to-day basis, I kind of try and mold to that. But I've always, all of them have always been particularly good on punctuation, for example, and timings and wanting briefings ahead of, knowing exactly what they're doing at what particular time, like diary management and everything. A lot of these individuals, they're very on point with, and that's how they've got to where they've got to, and how they've been successful. So, and I've probably had those traits drummed into me from a youngster anyway. So that I probably haven't. I kind of knew that, but I'm probably unaware of a lot of and actually just being. Like, all individuals are entirely different. So just being in close connection with them and just understanding, what their passions are, and then how I can, and I've learned, a lot around sort of diversity and inclusion and representation with a lot of the individuals that I have worked with, which I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't worked with those individuals or been in this kind of specific industry. So more around society, I think, is probably more so, and it's given me a wider breadth of knowledge of how the world works, more so than maybe any particular kind of skill as such. I think it's opened my eyes up to kind of the breadth of opportunities there are around the world.
That's really interesting because in my mind, I would assume that it had to do more with maybe like work ethic and overcoming adversity, but it's really a larger perspective than only that.
Yeah, look, you do learn, when you hear these individuals talk, you talk about sort of the things that they have done to get over a certain negative moment in their life, yes, of course, you just certainly take something from them, but I would say more around their own personal values and ethics, and has enabled me that I can go into a number of different social situations and feel like I can kind of be part of that situation and talk about it, and I feel knowledgeable about it. So I think that has been the most influential element of that, and I feel like I'm a more rounded individual as a result of that, and probably a nicer person as a result of that as well.
That's great. Focusing on you a little bit, going back to your background, I know that you grew up on a farm. So from there, how did you get into the sports industry? Did you play sports and then working ourselves up to where you are now?
Yeah, I did grow up on a farm. My brother runs the farm now, and with my dad. So still very much go back there whenever I can. Yeah, grew up on a farm my whole life. So that was a huge part of kind of what I did, and but sport has been a huge part of my life in terms of whether it's playing it, watching it, playing it on the computer, or video games or whatever it might be. It was socials. Everything evolved around kicking a ball or throwing something. And yeah, so I just did that through school and things. But I went to university. I went to an agricultural college for university, which was, I suppose, the natural progression because I was from a farming background. That was kind of, maybe it had it's kind of the natural direction to go. But I just towards the end of my degree I thought this isn't quite right for me. Can't see myself going to go and work in. My course was rural land management, so kind of managing land and consulting to land agents and farmers and things. And I just had my passion has always been sport, so I kind of thought, why do I not go and try and attempt to get into the world of sport? I was naive to the fact of like how I even do that. The one thing I did know is I did have a real interest in how the world of sport works. I always kind of was interested in like who the brands were in and around kind of on front of football shirts or in the Olympics or and I was kind of grew up in the era of the evolution of the Premier League as well, so that I was kind of real sucked into that journey in kind of in the 90s of the growing phenomenon that is the Premier League. So I was kind of bought into that and the Olympics, and yeah, I was just always really interested. So I thought, you know what, this is probably an area for me, I just tried to get as many internships as I could, or knock on as many doors as I could, and it did prove difficult because it is a competitive landscape. Everyone wants to work in sport because it's cool. It's perceived to be fun, and yeah, I found it very difficult. I got rejected from so many different internships, but yeah, I finally got one for a company called Generate Sponsorship, who unfortunately are no longer, but they were actually great. And they used to give loads of people internships. I think they used to have one every month almost. So, and gave me a month or two, I think it was, and then I was able to then get passed on to someone else. I think it was Maxi Muscle. I was Maxi Nutrition, the nutrition company. Worked there for a couple of months, and then managed to get this sort of entry level job at this sponsorship agency, and then it's sort of the rest is history in a way. But it took me a while to get into the industry, just because of people would look at my CV and go, "Oh, you went to an agricultural college and now you want to work in sport. How does that work?" So people couldn't quite see through that, and but yeah, there was a couple of people who I think obviously I kind of connected with and understood kind of my work ethic from working from a farming background, the jobs I was doing in between my internships of landscape gardening, and I was a fencing contractor, and I was doing a lot of outdoor jobs. And people going, "Well, you obviously work hard, so why not give you a go?" And then I suppose I don't know if there is ever a conventional way in sport. I don't think most people. Well, maybe there are more traditional sports courses you can do now, but 15 years or so ago, 15, 20, you didn't really do a sports course. It was kind of geography or business studies or psychology or, what in my case, land management. So yeah, slightly unconventional route into the world of sport. And yeah, I'm glad I kind of pushed it because it's been a fun last sort of 15 years or so.
Yeah, and it's really important to emphasize, I think, that of course there is a traditional way. I would say, today you can study sports management, you can go through an internship, but that's not the only way. And I mean, I've had so many people on this podcast that they are like yourself in agriculture or engineering or finance, and then still found their way. So you said, getting rejected from a lot of internships, but pushing through and getting there anyway. So what you think that mentality, is that something that's always been with you?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think it comes with an element of kind of doing a lot of sport. A lot of team sports. You sort of never die. Never give up attitude. All those type of things. My parents incredibly, driven individuals and wanted and made sure that we had the right kind of just general kind of skills and things to be able to try and succeed in life. And one of those things was just keep on going. You'll get there, and don't give up. And so yeah, and I just knew I wanted to be in that world. So I just kept on going really. And but yeah, as you say, I don't certainly in getting into the world of sport, and actually more so now. And sometimes we look for individuals who have got direct experience within the industry, and I don't think that's always the right thing to do. Yeah, don't get me wrong. If you need a specific person to do a specific job, and they've got the background, then fine. But I think, and is it because I have ended up doing what I'm doing? I don't know, because I came from that background. But I think we have to look at the sort of diverse recruitment model a little bit within the sort of sports industry, because we tend to recruit within, and actually there are a lot of individuals probably outside of the world of sport that can have a huge impact at every different level. And I think what we try to do as an organisation is to do that as well, and to look at people with different skill sets and backgrounds and experiences that we think can evolve and develop our business and our culture.
Yeah, of course. And I've spoken about that before as well, but diverse teams perform better. That's something that's been studied a lot recently.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about overcoming these adversities and getting into the industry, there's a lot of young people listening that maybe they are early in their career or they want to get into their career. So what would be some advice for them based on your experiences?
Not to narrow your thinking too much. So I suppose you can only go by your own experiences, but I just wanted to get in the world of sport. I didn't really know what it was I wanted to do, really. I just knew that I just love sport. So, which probably helped me to start with, because I could take anything really. So I think my experience, there are so many different avenues now into sport, whether it's marketing or events, or going to work for into governance, or even in like community sport, and like I think once you're in the sport, it's then significantly easier to then move around within the world of sport. So I think everyone has a bit of an idea of the kind of stuff that they want to do, which I think gives you an element of a guide. But I think one of my main things is to just throw yourself into any opportunity you can, because you'll learn. And you'll learn whether it's the right thing for you or not. But if it's not, then you can then go, because you're in that world, you can then move on to something different. So I would just try and meet as many people from different parts of the industry, speak to as many different people, but also just don't be too. If certainly that real entry level, like if you're literally trying to get into the world of sport, just get into the world of sport essentially, rather than on a definitely in terms of my industry, from an athlete management perspective, that's incredibly difficult to get in straight away, unless you got some really good mates who are professional players, and you can kind of start working with them or working with their respective agents. But there's not many jobs that come up as being a representative, for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Looking back on your career, has there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, there has been, both professionally and personally, I suppose, because personally there was a few things personally that kind of then affected my professional work. But some of them are small, some of them are large. But I think that the main way I managed to get over all of those sort of difficult moments was just to bring other people into the equation. So whether it was sharing the issue, because I've got such a good relationship with my team and my bosses and the senior leadership team within the company, if there's an issue, that we'll work it all out together. So it's I think the communications, building the rapport with your friends, your family, and just not try to deal with something on your own. Ultimately, try and get other people to kind of work with you and support you on dealing with those difficult moments. And that's one of the very fortunate things about kind of being in a business that has, actually as a whole organization, I think we've got about 70 people, because we've got the parent company Benchmark that has a couple of different businesses, but within thinkBeyond we're about 20 odd people. So being able to kind of talk through difficult situations is the best way, I would say, I've kind of managed to deal with those.
I think that's easier said than done, right? Because a lot of people have a tough time asking for help, and maybe if you're doing a tough time, you are going within and keeping it inside.
Yeah. Oh, the vulnerability, and to maybe if it's something that you've done as a mistake, or it's tough to go, look, guys, I messed up here. Can we help? But showing and being confident in the vulnerability that you're about to show, that and it's trust. It's trust within the team. But you're right. I've had to be. I have found it difficult in the past, and it's certainly one. I'm a lot better about it now. But you have to kind of go. You need someone to tell you, go and speak to someone, and once you go and do that, it makes it significantly easier. And look, that is all about creating a culture within an organization that everyone feel comfortable to talk to you about absolutely anything. big or small. And I hope to think that's what we have done as a business, having been there for nearly 10 years now and having seen it evolve. I would say that, the culture that we've managed to establish within the business is actually probably one of the most important, well, is certainly the most important, but also one of the kind of things we're most proud of, for sure, because whatever it might be, we're there to kind of, you spend most of the time at work, don't you? So you want to feel comfortable and happy there. So no, you're right. It is difficult. It is difficult.
But that's great to hear that you're really focusing on, implementing that at work. Because as we said, if you're on an entry-level job and you made a mistake, you might, find that very, very difficult. So to have that culture internally that it's okay to speak about it and ask for help, that's really important.
Yeah, and look, as long as you learn from it, right, and as long as you off the back of it, you analyze how and why that situation happened, and you attempt not to try and do that again. That's all that can be asked of you.
Definitely. Approaching the end here, is there something I haven't asked you yet that you would like to mention?
No, I don't think so. No, I suppose I love people to kind of have a look at kind of some of the stuff that we do as an organization. I think we're quite unique in what we do. In terms of our approach, who we work with, we used to be kind of called as a business kind of the industry's sort of best kept secret, but I think people are now starting to realize about some of the work that we do and the great people that we have within the organization that deliver that.
So how can they find you? If you plug your channels, the website, some socials, or how can people learn more about?
Yeah, so probably our website. So we've actually just got a new website now, which is thinkbeyond.consulting. And on LinkedIn is probably also then the best place to either find me, but also the organization, which will just be Think Beyond as well.
Fantastic. So I like to end with a networking question. So who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this podcast?
No, I work with some great people, but I also want to suggest someone that maybe could give you a slightly different perspective on things. There is, do you know what a good one who would be? Would probably be my brother, actually, who is director of marketing for the UK for Monster Energy.
Oh, wow.
So he's got quite a decent job. He's got a serious job.
But was he the same person you said that worked on the farm as well when you said you grew up?
No, so I've got two brothers. So
okay,
yeah,
okay.
So the Richard, who's the youngest, he works in Monster Energy, and then the other one, he manages the farm at home. And Richard would be a good person to speak to. He's been at Monster Energy now for a few years, but his journey into the world of kind of marketing and I suppose extreme sports. Now he's got quite an interesting journey. I think you would enjoy hearing, and he's a bit more creative than I am. That's for sure.
No, that sounds really interesting. Good name, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
Pleasure, Marcus. It's been great fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.